Hey everyone, it's Peter. Today we're diving into a topic that's important for anyone working with deploying and configuring AWS and using CI/CD pipelines or automation that is external to AWS. Specifically, we're going to use AWS IAM Roles Anywhere. Specifically, we're going to use AWS IAM Roles Anywhere, which is a welcome improvement to security in the way our external pipelines authenticate with our AWS environment. Usually when we configure automated deployment to AWS with a pipeline that's external to AWS, we create AWS access keys. Access keys are nothing but a password containing random letters and numbers that's generated for us by AWS when we create an IAM account. Ideally, storing them as secrets in our pipeline systems like Azure DevOps, GitHub, etc. But let's be honest, access keys can sometimes be accidentally exposed. A developer might push code with a key to a public Git repo, or a misconfigured pipeline could leak them in logs. Suddenly, your AWS environment is vulnerable. If you're lucky enough those credentials don't get exposed, you still have to make sure you are performing good security practices, such as rotating the keys or passwords regularly every 2 to 3 months. Then each time you have to go through the process of securely exchanging the keys with your developers again, and they have to update their application to use the new keys. But what if there was a way to give your external pipeline agents temporary, secure access to AWS without needing to store or manage any long-term keys? That's where AWS IAM Roles Anywhere comes in. It's like the front desk at a hotel you're checking into, handing you a temporary key card after verifying your identity, which will give you access to your assigned room for the duration of your reservation. So instead of long-lived static access keys, we're using short-lived dynamically issued credentials based on trust. Today, I'm going to walk you through a complete demo of setting up IAM Roles Anywhere with Azure DevOps pipelines to deploy a CloudFormation template. We'll use self-signed certificates for this demo, but in a production environment, you'd use certificates issued by the Enterprise Certificate Authority. Before we jump into the demo, let's quickly break down what IAM Roles Anywhere is and how it works. The first bit there is your Azure DevOps agent having a certificate. This certificate is like a digital ID card. In our hotel room analogy, it's you presenting your passport to front desk to prove you're who you say you are. Will the front desk trust this passport? Of course it will, because it's issued by a recognized government agency. But in the digital world, AWS will need to be explicitly told through what is called a trust anchor for it to know that, hey, I trust these certificates issued by this authority called Bob. Next, you need to define an IAM role. It's like the room key card that will allow you access to only a specific room. You will need to configure an IAM role to specify what the Azure DevOps pipeline is allowed to do in AWS, such as deploy CloudFormation stacks. Next, you'll create a profile. You'll need to create a Roles Anywhere profile to specify which role is to be assumed based on the certificate. Lastly, you configure your CI/CD pipeline to use the certificate with the profile, the IAM role, and the trust anchor you've just configured. And the best thing there is there's no long-term AWS keys involved. All right, let's get our hands dirty. Note that the scripts and templates I'll be using for this demo will be available online on my Azure DevOps and GitHub repo with a link in the description below. We'll start by creating the self-signed certificate for our Azure DevOps agent. So this is just running this create cert script If I open that, it's just a little script that uses OpenSSL to create a certificate authority and a certificate. The certificate will be used by the CI/CD agent to authenticate with AWS. And the certificate authority is used to sign the certificate. Again, this is just for demo purposes because in the real world, you will have a process for requesting and issuing certificates from your enterprise PKI. We'll just save the certificate authority public key into a variable called cert bundle so that we will be using that at a later stage. Next, we need to deploy the trust anchor to AWS. We'll use a CloudFormation template. You can, of course, do this on the AWS console, but when we can, we should do it via infrastructure as code. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. The trust anchor has a parameter trust anchor name, which is referred to in this line, as well as this certificate bundle parameter, which is the one we saved into the variable of the public certificate of the certificate authority. We'll just sign into AWS. Then deploy the CloudFormation template with this command using this template file that we just had a look at with its stack name, using the parameters trust anchor and certificate bundle. Then we'll just save the trust anchor unique ID based off on the CloudFormation stack that we've created. We can even show that here, that this is the unique ID of the trust anchor, or ARN. Whenever you see ARN, it's just AWS terminology for Amazon resource name. And it's, as you can see, there is a unique ID for each resource that you create in AWS. Now let's create the IAM role with the necessary permissions to deploy CloudFormation stacks. We'll just pay close attention to the trust policy and the permissions, which I'll show you when we open the role template. The interesting sections here are these two sections, the assume role policy document and the managed policy ARN section. Let's start with the assume role policy document. We're applying the principle of least privilege here by saying that the role can only be assumed by the Roles Anywhere service, and only if the service uses a combination of the certificate with a specific subject name and the unique identifier, so that's the subject name, and a unique identifier of the trust anchor that we've created for this purpose. This is quite restrictive and it's best practice. Further applying the principle of least privilege is the granting of what the role can do. The paragraph manage policy ARNs restricts the role to DynamoDB and CloudFormation access because we're deploying a DynamoDB resource via CloudFormation. We'll just save that into a variable. Again, we'll just print it out to make sure we've captured that variable, the value into the variable correctly. Next, we need to create the IAM Roles Anywhere profile to associate the trust anchor and the CI/CD role. It tells AWS when a trusted certificate comes in, and from this trust anchor, and it's associated with the CI/CD IAM role, granted the permissions defined by this profile. Let's just have a look at the IAM Roles Anywhere profile. There's nothing special to see here. It's just associating the IAM role to the profile. Okay, we now have all the Roles Anywhere bits configured. Let's just have a look on CloudFormation, on those resources we've created. So I have the IAM Roles Anywhere trust anchor, the role stack, the IAM role, and the IAM Roles Anywhere profile. If we go to IAM roles, I'll just show you where it is that you'll find this. So this is the CI/CD role that we've just created. It has these two AWS managed permissions for DynamoDB and CloudFormation. And this is where we've defined who can assume this role. As you can see, your certificate needs to have a combination of the subject name as well as the trust anchor that you're using must be coming from this Trust Anchor unique identifier. For the Roles Anywhere profile and the Trust Anchor, you can find that here. This is the Trust Anchor, and this is the profile that we've just created by CloudFormation. Now comes the Azure DevOps part. Remember, this could be GitHub Actions or GitLab or any CI/CD tool of your choice that is external to AWS. As you can see, we don't have any pipelines configured. First, make sure you have the Azure CLI installed and the Azure DevOps extension. Then we log into Azure with this AZ login command. Then we'll just define the organization name and the project name of our Azure DevOps project. We then create a variable group called dev to store the unique identifiers of the profile, the Trust Anchor, and the IAM role via this command. Then we'll create a pipeline called release pipeline IAM Roles Anywhere. But we can now go back to Azure DevOps and refresh and see that we've got this pipeline all set up. If we look at our library, we've got this variable group named dev with these variables in it. This will come in handy when we call the pipeline and refer to it in the pipeline. In here, we'll need to manually upload the certificates as secure files. So I'll be uploading the private key. I'm also uploading the public certificate. Let's now run the pipeline. And we'll need to grant permissions to those variable groups. See the variable group and the two secure files that we've uploaded. We'll need to manually give permission. While it's deploying, let's go over the pipeline definition. This is the pipeline definition. Let's just go through the steps. The first one here in line 14 is just getting the binaries for AWS Signing Helper. It's just a program that AWS provided to help us sign in with the Roles Anywhere service using the certificates, the Trust Anchor, and the profile. Next is it's downloading the secure files, the certificate.crt and the public certificate. And then in line 29, we have this command that calls the AWS Signing Helper, and also providing with that the certificate, the secure file, and also the private certificate, the ARNs for Trust Anchor, the profile, and the role ARN, and setting that into a variable for Azure DevOps. And lastly, it's just doing a standard CloudFormation deploy of this DynamoDB template using these parameters from this parameters file. Let's switch back to Azure Pipelines, and we can see that it has successfully created. So it follows the step that we just went over with you, the pipeline YAML file. Let's check that it has successfully created the DynamoDB table. We've named it the test deploy IAM Roles Anywhere. And if we look at resources, the demo DynamoDB table. There you have it. We've successfully deployed from Azure DevOps to AWS without the use of access keys. So there you have it. We successfully deployed to AWS from Azure DevOps using IAM Roles Anywhere without ever having to store or manage long-term AWS keys. The benefits are increased security by eliminating long-lived access keys, simplified credential management, and better auditability. You know exactly which certificate and profile were used for each deployment. Let me know in the comments what you think about IAM Roles Anywhere. Have you tried it? Are you planning to? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.